What is going on, you guys? It's your boy, the somber schizophrenic here, and we are back with episode 123 of the video game therapy series. I was a little wary of even making this video because, as I've so aptly noticed, that every time I post videos, I lose subscribers. And I did hit 500 subscribers, which is kind of a cool milestone. But of course, with the posting of this video, I presume that number will then swiftly drop below the 500. Um, but I've also just been busy doing shit. So anyway, back on the horse today, and hopefully have some interesting things to talk about. Um, First thing I was just thinking about, and I hate to categorize these as like archetypes or just even to make things about gender or anything. Not that I think it's always a stupid idea, but I was thinking about this idea of masculinity and where like what I think like a healthy form of masculinity is. Not that again, this is not a conversation about like toxic masculinity or whatever the fuck that means. It's more about what I'll say is even secure masculinity versus an insecure. And I was thinking just about like authoritative leaders throughout time. Obviously, people that good and bad leaders have both had um, strains of what people would call as very masculine like behavior. But I think I guess leadership behavior that borders on authoritative, I think, originates from insecurity and paranoia, I suppose, would be the other kind of contributing factor to that. Whereas I think true like masculinity in my eyes, and this is just maybe my definition, doesn't yearn for power or some ability to exert influence over other people, which I guess is a decent definition for power, but instead just yearns for like sovereignty and freedom. So I think a true embodiment of masculinity is some extent of self reliance, and I think that truly is much more masculine in nature than like being the top dog. Whatever that means. So I think if you're comparing like I guess to put this in brain rot speak, I'm kind of comparing alphas to sigmas, and simply saying that that sigmas are more masculine than alphas, or are just they mog alphas, I suppose. If I'm gonna continue on the brain rot trend, but um, because presumably sigmas are more focused on this self-reliance attitude, and not worried about their place in the social hierarchy. Whereas I think the alphas are in to varying degrees insecure with where they stand, and so they have to impose some kind of power on people. And that I think that truly is one of the like greatest vices I see is just rules for thee but not for me, and it manifests itself a lot more than just actually like making rules and things. I think about like something as silly as like a teacher breaking their own rules for their classroom, or the coach for their team or something like that. And this obviously does worse and worse as you scale to governments and whole societies where they people might preach about notions of equity and inclusion or whatever the fuck any of that means, and then of course it's like with their actions they don't, well, I'm exempt from this because I'm a millionaire or whatever, and the financial aspect of it I think is what um, people tend to use to justify their absolvement of from these rules. But I think that again, to bring it back to the masculinity point, stems from a position of insecurity versus a position of not even power really, but then of self assurance. Whereas the truly more masculine person in my eyes would be one that you know gives rules for life and lives by that, and doesn't is not hypocritical in that sense, or at least is less hypocritical. Anyway, I'll move on to something else just because I'm not in the not in the mindset for comparing alphas and sigmas anymore. That is stupid as that whole concept is anyway. But I'm thinking about just and this is just again another kind of rumination on metaphysics in general. But you've heard a lot, probably like mind over matter as a common phrase to, maybe if you're challenged to eat something disgusting, it's, mind over matter, I think everyone had those gooners in the cafeteria that would make those diabolical, mixtures of ketchup and milk and chicken nuggets or whatever, and then someone would have to eat it, and you might have heard mind and matter in a context like that, but or with something else, I don't know, anything else that you want to do, you're going down a hill or a slide or something you're scared of, mind over matter. But I guess the question is, or the rebuttal to that is that the mind literally is matter. So but I think that kind of denotes that the only thing that is capable of transcending itself is this human mind. And I think that is part of what delineates our consciousness versus maybe other animals and things, is that we actively try to, I'll say, like, transcend our own existence. So we, are trying to kind of go beyond and understand our own understanding, which again I think does, maybe it leads into this point from Hofstadter's, like, strange loops, where it's everything is just kind of these recursive loops. There's not really anything, like, if you're looking for the origin point, you're just going to be picking a dot on the circle. Whereas, other people, like, logically, you might think there's a beginning and an end somewhere. So the mind obviously begins with some kind of matter somewhere and ends, with a thought, or, some kind of, even a physiological response, with, like, your arms or something like that. But me thinking to move my arm, that has to start with some, piece of matter, given this, like, reductionist worldview. Whereas maybe the people who are more spiritual might have different responses to that. But surely, in terms of describing, and maybe that's just speaks to the limitations of a reductionist philosophy, where if you view brains as just a big hunk of solid gray matter that can that has electrical impulses that go through it, and you try to tie those electrical impulses to things, you're essentially, I think what ends up happening is that however you might describe things. Let's say we're going to break things down in terms of, like, neurons, and so, okay, all right, so we're going to model this neuron, and the neuron is in the brain. That's like what's what the model is supposed to do. But I think what maybe I don't tend to realize, or people don't tend to realize in general, is that the model of this neuron that we've quote unquote discovered, or really, I guess, crafted. It's not even really, we didn't really discover it. It was kind of something we made up to help us understand it. Is only, maybe it is it's a lossy proxy for what actually occurs. It's not like there was, some divine or, otherwise otherworldly deity that gave us this, mapping of a neuron. It was somebody came up with it, and it did a pretty damn good job of describing activity. And there wasn't really anyone that could say, well, it doesn't work like that, or I don't see evidence for this, this mapping. Everyone's kind of like, oh, well, this kind of looks, this is pretty much how it works. Yeah, listen. But I think claiming that it's like that is the like it's 100% accurate, meaning that, like, it's a complete isomorphism, which, if you're not familiar with that word, is essentially like a one-to-one mapping. So you could, like, if you could map every word to every letter, that would be, you could call those isomorphic. Same with, like, two identical triangles, you can call them isomorphic. That's what that means. But saying that, like, the description, or the I guess a neuron, a drawing of a neuron or something, and the neuron in the brain are identical. Obviously one's obviously just a drawing and is a representation of things. But even if we're able to, again, emulate a neuron within on a computer, are you really saying that, like, this biological neuron and the computer neuron are the same? Like, unequivocally the same. And surely they're similar, and they have, I'll say, even isomorphic properties where they might behave in very, very similar ways. Maybe with the brain being more complex, that's kind of the, what people will submit to. Like, all right, well, yeah, there's just more neurons here than, we're able to make with, transistors. But with small enough transistors and a large enough computer, we can, again, model what would happen, and, we can make ourselves a human brain, which I think is a little bit arrogant in our understanding and our application of the models that we use. Which, again, is never to say or accuse scientific models of being useless. That's not what I'm going after either. But I just don't. I would never call them isomorphic. That is a representation of a neuron with a computer and an actual, physical neuron. And this is even looking at it through the eyes of a, uber reductionist kind of empirical scientist, where you're just trying to boil everything down to its smallest constituent part and, take it apart one by one. I still don't. I still would not call the a brain's neuron and a computer's neuron, equivocal. They're wholly different. Even ethics aside, even if it's a person who's in a vegetative state, the neurons in their brain are still not the same as a brain as a RTX 4090 or whatever. Um, anyway, that's just one of my opinions. But it's just I was thinking about just that saying mind over matter, and it's interesting that the mind is both matter, but is one of the only things that the human brain is one of the things that wants to transcend itself and kind of get beyond its own existence, which is an interesting like I don't know if there's any other species or any other even property that has the not even property but any other I don't even say like living thing or any other thing that tries to transcend itself or is aware of its own thing and tries to go beyond. And maybe you can make the case for like monkeys and stuff philosophizing, but how are we supposed to know? I guess not speaking their language. I guess dolphins are supposed to be the next most intelligent, or elephants or something. And sure, they have like tendencies we might call human that we might say, oh, well, it's like, look at it, it's pondering its existence. It's like, how the fuck do you know that? It's an elephant just like rubbing its head with its trunk. That's not what that means. So until we're able to communicate in some kind of common language, you'd have no idea. And it's possible that other animals too, like for whatever brief period of time, do have some kind of, I'll say, even contemplative, measure. But surely, to our current knowledge, and this might be just another kind of arrogant human take, is just that we are kind of the only species that actively tries to transcend itself and to understand its own understanding, which isn't something I think you can say for any other being. Or I guess that's really the only I guess you have to have some level of like being aliveness to have self awareness. I'm not sure if something can be self aware but dead. I feel like that those two are in opposition with one another. But anyway, um, yeah, I guess I'll start talking about corporations now because it tends to be a common theme of mine too. So I heard this. I don't even know where I heard this, but and this was probably a while ago too. But corporations trying to like be people, and ironically, people trying to be corporations, and it's similar to the statement I had a while ago about like and this wasn't me again saying this is me forking it off of somebody, but that humans are trying to be more and more like machines. Like we're trying to like mechanize and optimize every moment of everything as if we're like, organizing our, L2 cache for our processor, which is just not the fucking way the brain works. Like we don't get low level hardware control over our own biology. And sure, you can like, snort Adderall and cocaine or something like that and be smarter for 5 minutes, but you surely like, I argue you probably pay the price later at some point, because you don't. It's not like you can truly optimize any kind of zero sum brain without, I guess having some, bad effects down the line. Whereas with a computer, you could, legitimately optimize a cache or optimize like the way the processor's, handling instructions or something like that. But irony, of course, we're also trying to make machines more human. When, like, is it just that humans aren't human enough for us? Like, we don't have enough human and companionship amongst our peers. We can't find enough common ground with things that are already like almost identical to us in every conceivable way. Because we tend to take for granted just how similar all humans are, and even across all like uh, generations. You read books from people that have been dead for thousands of years, and you're just like, damn, like that is exactly how I feel. Or like, wow, that's like very relatable. But this person, they didn't have an iPhone. They didn't live in a time where there was even, a toilet. They all shit in holes or something, or whatever. I don't know. Whoever you're reading an old book from, they surely didn't live life, a daily life, anything remotely close to what it is now. But yet, you still like, I still feel a sense of companionship and like, wow, like of oneness with them. And apparently that isn't enough for some people to try to develop, again, artificial like camaraderie almost, which to me is a little bit sickening, and it's kind of a slap in the face to everybody. It's like if you're some company is working on making like AI friends because I guess you don't have any friends and you have to have a bot to be your friend. It's a little bit sad that like it's not even that like they want like a better friend or something, but that like the people they're so like I guess low on humanity's future that they think that it's not no human is I can relate to them as well as a robot that they could program could, which I think is both arrogant and silly. And it stems from people just I think being uh, I don't know maybe arrogance is the root of it all. Uh, anyway, move on to something else here. Gotta see what's on my list. Yeah, this is another thing I was talking about. I think computing in general. Now, with computing, I mean both like the kind of abstraction of a person using a computer, as well as like people that work on computers. I think in general needs to be more prohibitive. So, in my eyes, like the fact that anybody and everybody can just like openly uh, write and share text files and make websites despite like not knowing anything about the web. I think it might sound good that you're like democratizing some of these things, but I think in many ways it isn't good because I think a lot of the woes of the modern technology landscape is because computing has been ultimately way too accessible for people. Like it needs to be more prohibitive. And it's not even accessibility per se, like, because I think people with disabilities or if you're blind or something, I think like that, I would call that accessibility. I think what I'm referring to here is convenience, or like the amount of convenience, um, or the price of that is ultimately everything that we're paying right now. So, I guess whatever problems that you care about the most. So whether that's economic turmoil from, tech companies ravaging, the economy or having just a stranglehold on it, or if it's a privacy thing where it's you don't have any any autonomy over your data or what's happening and how's that used against you, or just maybe you're addicted to TikTok or you buy stuff off the TikTok shop or something stupid. I mean, I don't know. Whatever that is, I think is the price that you're paying for the convenience of this technology. And of course, it was sold to people as something totally different, right? Is how ironic it is that like Facebook's whole pitch was, oh, we're connecting people. It's like I think now people would want to go back to not connecting as much. Um, and with AI, I think it may only get worse for a while, but I do have this kind of faith in this. I'll say just like indomitable human spirit that will kind of will transcend this at some point. Like I think enough at some point people will have enough, and ultimately it'll end up in some kind of. I don't want it to be some kind of revolution, some kind of violent war thing, because I think most of that is just kind of is needless and it is pointless. I think as intelligent as our species is, I think one thing that is stupid is blowing people up or or just killing them or having like weird like or not comprehending the possibility that your like crazy religion is like may not be everyone doesn't have to believe all that. I'm sure you believe it, and part of believing it is like believing that you need to kill other people for whatever you're defending. But at the same time, I think is that's also I think it's kind of a waste of your human faculties to assume that like that your religion or whatever it is that whatever your justification is for launching missiles at people and killing them. I think is silly. Because I just don't know that it war or death or violence is a necessary thing when we have the ability to communicate. Right? It's like if different societies were completely alien to one another and it was impossible for you know, let's say like the American and the Chinese to talk at all, like if there's no ability to communicate um, or negotiate anything, then it might make more sense. Like why, I guess people are blowing people up because it's like, well, they don't know, we don't really know what their intentions are, or how what they do. But it's the other thing what I see here is now that like, oh, we understand, we can like we have translators and stuff, but like, fuck them, I still want to blow them up. It's like, all right, well, really that's like the best solution we have is just to is to I guess make people's livelihoods to create more weapons to then kill other people. I don't know. I'm just not very bullish on like war in general. I know there's a whole like economic argument for that, but I find these economic arguments like incredibly weak on things where it's like, well, the economy, and they treat the economy, and people treat the economy as some like, like baby that we have to like care for, or like the fact like, well, the stock market will go down, and then it's like, I think I've said this before, and I'll say it again. Like 90% of it is all like fake bullshit. I mean, most companies that are worth all these billions of, they don't do anything. Like they make no bread. They don't produce anything. I'm not saying that like there isn't like services that are worth something, right? Like, a cleaning company can't be worth money, but they don't really make anything. They just clean things. But they don't do any of that either. And like what I think my underlying problem is that making people money is not a service, right? That's arbitrage is what that is. If the only thing your company does is make other people money, or make yourself money, or make your company money, you're not a real company. You don't do anything. You don't provide. That's not a service. I don't think that can count as a service. Because really all you're doing then is just arbitraging the stock market in some way. And doing math on something, which again is only valuable in the sense that it produces money. But again, it's kind of a self fulfilling loop there. It's like if the economy is not worth anything, then neither are you. But if you convince everybody the economy is worth something, then you are worth something. But what I'm saying is, I don't think that you are worth something, because your only quote unquote service is to make other people or yourself money. But that doesn't, if the money is just an abstraction, which it is, by the way. The money is an abstraction on top of, originally it was a bartering system, but now I'm not even really sure what money even represents anymore. Surely it's not a proxy for well-being or happiness anymore. And I think people forget that too, where they assume that like if the economy's good, everyone's going to be happy. It's like, I no, some of the worst years of my life have probably been during great periods of economic growth, and I'm doing fine right now. Actually, I'm doing well, and the economy is horrible. So I don't know. It didn't affect me that much, and now that's a weak ass argument too. But I don't know. I just find people that anthropomorphize the economy as some like baby that we can't hurt. I mean, I don't know. I don't know that the impact of this quote unquote economy is gonna hurts everybody the same, or hurts people at all to some extent. It's not really real to me. Somebody made a joke that's just like, turn the stock market off, just flip a switch, and then what actually happens? Are people gonna like stop making bread and things? It's like, I don't know. The companies that make bread and sell bread will make money by selling the bread that they make, right? But I think it's the companies that do these like services that aren't like cleaning services. It's not somebody that or service for flipping a burger or something like that. They don't sell anything, or they don't make anything. Those are the companies I think would really fall out from this. And I think that is emblematic of the problem, is that if the entire world would blow up if we turn the stock market off, that kind of implies that the stock market only represents, or mostly represents, I guess, companies that don't really do anything. They don't like make any bread. They don't make burgers. They don't clean houses. They just kind of sit there and make more money. But that's not a real job. It's like that Rick and Morty thing where it's like, well, I'll keep track of everyone's bread. It's like, well, that's not a job. Um, yeah, I don't know. It doesn't, making people money is not a real job. That's not a thing. I realize that you can get paid for that, and I think they conflate like, oh, if I get paid for this, therefore it's a real job. But I've gotten paid for things that aren't jobs. They don't like do it. I'm not doing anything, but I'm getting paid. That doesn't mean that it's a real job, or that it should be a job. And maybe that it is in the sense that you do get paid for something. I'm not saying that you don't and you can't make money doing nothing, but making money doing nothing inevitably leads to problems at some point. I don't think you can argue with that fact. Is that if everybody made money without doing anything, the world might not function properly. And I think that's just kind of, again, that's more of an intuitive thought. And if I had to wager that what would happen if everybody did nothing, if nobody cooked bread, or nobody cleaned shoes or houses, or whatever the fuck people are doing now, if nobody did actual things, then the world would really be fucked. So I think if you're not doing anything real, then you're part of the problem. And I don't care how much money you make, or if you have lots of money, or whatever the excuse you have is. If you're not actually doing something, then you're not helping, right? And I think the other thing is, I think I'd rather them, like, if you're just unemployed, which is again is a fine temporary status, I think, I guess to some degree, you're almost doing better than people that are actively suckling. Because I would even say that like the finance industry is parasitic in nature, where less people that work there, the better, because your people that work there are fucking people over. They're pulling money out of somebody's making that money is that money means bread somewhere to somebody somewhere. The money that that person made, on commission or whatever, their alpha or whatever the fucking Roman numeral is. That money, somebody sold bread to make that money, or they sold cocaine, or they sold something that caused that money to end up in that guy's pocket. Now that guy didn't do anything but shuffle, numbers around and things. Which, again, I'm saying making people money is not a real service. At least one that is beneficial to the economy. Maybe there's a better, economic framework to view this in, but that money represents bread to somebody, to me, actually. It represents money. It represents food to me. Like, that's what money is for me, is a vehicle to eat food. And I don't have to care about, I shouldn't have to care about a bunch of bullshit in the economy or the stocks or all these other investment, vectors or whatever, that most of which are bullshit gambling schemes anyway. I should be able to live my life with not giving a fuck about that, because not everyone has to care about. Not everyone needs to be a economic min maxer where everything is just like transactional. Because you just turn people into rats. People that are entirely driven by financial incentives are incredibly predictable, and then they literally are just computers at that point. Because I could just program whatever you're going to do. It is very, if you are driven by money, it is trivial for me to figure out what your next move is, because you're just not that complicated of a person. Because it's simple. Like, will this make you more money, or will this put you in a better financial situation? Yes or no. And then that's how you're going to behave, which I think is not that you need to be random or just do things, ad hoc all the time. But I think living their life entirely off of money and not off of like, what do I want to do? What's like a passion of mine? What do I think is important? You doing it solely based off money, again, just makes you predictable, and I think gives you a lower quality of life in general. So, and again, there are exceptions, and I would love to, I guess, bash these people's heads in, people whose passion is like finance. So it's like, I had a friend of mine, and it just drives me nuts. And bashing my head was not literal. That was metaphorical. Just, I'm not inciting violence here, obviously, and I also didn't name anybody specifically, but yeah, a friend of mine, I asked, I was like, so what would you do if you had $1 billion, and you didn't have to work anymore for the rest of your life? You go, You thought about it for a second. You go, I'd invest it. And I say, listen, that's not the point of the fucking exercise. That can't be. He's like, well, I love investing. And I said, so you just love, like, to just see a number go up? Like, so I think these people, anyone that thinks like that, we should put them in like a fake economy where, like, they can have these fake wallets, and, to them it'd be real, but they can't buy anything with this fake money. But then they're just almost in like their own little fake casino. Because that's kind of what a lot of these, financiers are. They're just gamblers. And some of them that are good, like, make money. And so therefore it's like called a real job because they're making money. But it doesn't change the fact that what they're doing is just glorified gambling. It's gambling, like, for responsible adults. That's really all the stock market is, in my opinion. Is if you're a responsible adult that has family and you want to gamble, you do sports, DraftKings sports betting, and then you put money in the stock market, and then that's all it is. Because I think it's not like, people making money doing nothing, I think, is not going to end up being a good thing for people. I think you should be able to have to work for your money, and if you have, if you want to retire, that should be money that you, like, saved, and doesn't have to, like, you should be making 20% a year or something on the money, because at some point things can't keep going up 20%, right? At some point things need to be like, uh, we're not achieving a balance, or a, look, what's the word I'm looking for here? I guess equanimous distribution of things. We want to achieve, like, calmness in things, because at some point we can't keep growing and everything. Not everything. The planet's only so big. There's only so many people. There's only so much that a human can do in a life anyway. There's only so much that a person can buy, or so many women that they can marry, or whatever it is that is supposedly driving these people. Like, growth is at some point a toxic ideology, and the ideology, or the, I guess, the motive of the cancer cell is what I've said before. But I mean, other people have said that, but um, still, I don't know. These financiers drive me nuts. Um, yeah. Also thinking just about culture in general, because as people become more predictable, as due to their own, like, you know, I guess their own impulses and things. And of course, advances in how we understand humans. I'm not saying that that's not doesn't play a factor in understanding humans, but certainly as people almost aren't really doing, they're kind of playing into all this, they're playing into their own psychology to make themselves more predictable, which I would try to not do. If someone's gonna make their whole life trying to predict what I do just so they can optimize, something, I would probably try to do things randomly to try and throw them off or something. Just because I feel like it's not a good thing to be, predictable. Because that I said predictability ultimately leads to control. So like if I could predict something, how far away could I be from controlling it? And I think that's fair, right? And so even you could make that same argument about like people that work that mess around with stocks all day. It's like if I can predict all the stocks, what's the odds I can't control it? I'm making a few phone calls, maybe, some insider trading, which I'm sure nobody does ever. Anyway, I'm thinking about just the impact of this on what I'll even say is culture, because places do have different cultures, and I think in general we're at least in the West, kind of emulsifying towards a singular culture. There's less diversity in thought, and I'm not gonna go into the I guess the specifics of why that is. I'm sure people have their own opinions. Maybe I will at some later point or later this episode. But for right now, I just want to speak about peak culture because I think at some point the culture in the way that I thought it was best peaked, and we're no longer at this we're no longer getting better. And this myth of progress that I've talked about before is evident, especially in our I'll just say in the ossification of our culture. I don't know that Western culture has done great advances in things, despite what the LinkedIn heads might have you believe. I think there maybe was a time where culture itself had even peaked, and this is culture like in a very vague sense. So I just mean in terms of to put tangible things to it. Music, movies, humor. Even I don't even think like most things like memes people send me. Just most of them just aren't funny. Like they're just not even. I mean, like yeah, they might be like vaguely relatable, but is like, am I gonna laugh? Like, am I gonna like out loud chuckle at this meme? Like, no, I'm not. Like most of them just aren't funny, and maybe I'm just romanticizing the past when I was stupider and more naive and a child that would laugh at anything. But I feel like it's harder and harder for me to laugh at any, especially like go pick any movie that's made in the last 10 years. I could watch the whole thing and not crack a single fucking smile. Not the whole time. But, you pick a movie from like the 90s or one of these early 2000s movie that I think are pretty good and I could laugh through the whole thing. So I think at some point and maybe not even the not too distant past, we did kind of have this culture peak where it was as good as it was going to be. And then maybe it was this kind of early 2000s or 90s to 2000s, and then maybe stopped around. We could just pin it on the whole Harambe death. I kind of like that as a framework for when the world kind of began to sink into disaster. Not even just the world, I guess, just the America's grasp on the future. I think it began to slip around when Harambe died, and then after that, it's kind of we're just heading towards whatever revolution or World War IV or something it's going to happen, and ultimately, we'll restart somewhere later if we don't completely exterminate ourselves, which I don't think we will. I think even if there is some big revolution of some kind or some war that we nuke each other to death, I think there'll be humans, Homo sapiens, will survive in some semblance, and there'll be artifacts of our culture in the same way there are artifacts of the pyramids and things. I'm sure at their time they thought this was as good as it was going to get, right? I'm sure that many people in ancient Egypt were like, oh my god, we got like water and aqueducts, and we're slaves don't mind being slaves or whatever. I guess I'm not that well versed on ancient Babylon or something, but I imagine they thought they had everything pretty figured out. They built the giant pyramid, like it's pretty fucking cool. Now like we have iPhones and stuff, so it's like I'm sure we also think we're cool, and this is kind of like as good as it's gonna get. But I'm sure in the next round of things, we'll look back, or I guess our edit predecessor, our future generations will look back and go, oh wow, those idiots thought they had it all figured out, huh? Of course they didn't. But I don't know. I just we'll lend towards that. And I don't want there to be some violent revolution, but I kind of think that it is inevitable in some sense. And I think the other strategy for mitigating this is to just not like a not to be participatory in any direct way. So it's like, I guess there's people that like, this has been well documented. Like, even if someone puts a gun to my head and says like, "We'll fight, or I'll kill you," kill me. I don't mean what I don't like. I don't have to like, I realize that there is this kind of like, instinctive like I want to survive thing that humans have, and that's, I'm not saying it's like a weak motive. It certainly is very very powerful desire, but like, you don't. You're not in a movie. Like, if someone puts a gun in my head and says you're either gonna fight, you're gonna start bombing Chinese people or something, or I'm gonna kill you. I'm like, all right, well then waste your bullet then. I don't care. It's like good, is that really that? Okay, how many more people you're going to do that to, right? I'm sure there'll be people that are, I think that even takes a certain amount of willpower, because I think people instinctively were like, "What? I don't want to die. I need to stay alive." It's like, well, for the sake of what, at that point, right? So I can kill other people and make sure they're not alive anymore. It's like, well, then fine. It's like if it's worth me, then, what did Jesus do? Jesus, let himself die, I guess, or let them kill him or whatever. Um, and it wasn't because he, part of it you can make was because he's like, he's Jesus or whatever. But like, you have an opportunity to do exactly what he just did, and you don't scoff at it because you're like, well, I'm not as good as Jesus or something. It's like, well, you can't be. You just die. Then just like let them kill you, because you're not going to do this. You don't have to, let them put you in jail or whatever. It's like fine. And at least you like did it. You died like morally, and you died with your wits about you. So it's like, I think it's even, you're choosing your own death there instead of like, you're probably they're gonna send you out in this battlefield and someone's gonna, you're gonna step on an IED and kill yourself, that way. And then it's like, well, did you really die your death then? It's like, no, you kind of died, the death that the powers that be, whoever enslaved you to go work in the military, you kind of died their death, where it's not yours. So I think even if, someone puts a gun on my head and says, fight or I'll kill you, then kill me. It's like, that's my death. I'm choosing to die that way. Fine. Yeah, sure. It's like, maybe I could have survived the war and have a story to tell. But it's like, I don't even, I'm not guaranteed that. So, if it means that much to you, then fine, waste your bullet and, have fun disposing my body. Which again is not a fun thing to like think about or contemplate, but I think is the way that I would choose. And I'd bet fine, even if it wasn't like I'll kill you, it's like fine, we'll just, we'll strap you upside down and torture you. And it's like fine, well, I'll eventually die at some point if you torture me hard enough. But I'd still rather just die with my morals and wits about me than to, I think it's just fearful to assume like, well, I need to survive and hold on for dear life. To white knuckle to what, so that like you can be the Nazi soldier responsible for killing, 5 million people or whatever. It's like, would you really rather be that guy than someone who just kind of died because they refused? And it's like, yeah, I'm sure it's like on both ends it's sad, but on one end you didn't kill anybody else; it's only you that died. And on the other end, you were then responsible, at least in some way, for however many other people dying. So it's like, fine, would I rather be responsible for one death and my own, which again seems fair, one for one, or be responsible for not only my own death because I'll eventually die for from something, or be responsible for everyone that I'm going to kill after. It's like that. Again, it seems like we're not thinking through the possibilities here. But I think if people are just trained on these movies where it's like they always survive and they train and they're always like, they're going to live forever and whatever. But it's like, no, I think in a real situation, it's not a fucking movie. You know, somebody gives me that ultimatum, fine. I mean, once I'm dead, I don't care. Or you fine, you torture me for 5 years. I probably won't like it, and I'll probably maybe I'll beg for freedom or something like that. But I'm not gonna just you do what somebody says just because they could kill me. It's like anyone could kill me all anytime. I could step outside in 5 minutes and somebody could put a gun to my head and kill me without ever. I don't even did I deserve that? No. And it's like, well, fine, but people get things they don't deserve all the time. It's not life isn't a fair, just thing, and we hope it is, and we kind of can push for it. But at the same time, we have to realize that it isn't, and there's a certain amount of just bad luck and things that happen to people, and to the extent that you can control doing bad things to other people and giving them bad luck. It's like, you know, I don't know. It's like, would you rather, I guess, get some incurable cancer disease or something like that for yourself, or would you rather give it to 100 people? It's like, all right, well, I mean, I guess first of all, I'd like, oh, can I pick the 100 people or whatever? um, because that'd be funny. But either way, it's like at some point, it's like the self-sacrifice is a much more noble way to go than to be like,
well, fuck them. Like I need, I'm more important than the other 100 people. I think that's kind of an arrogant opinion to have. Is that like inevitably I'm more important than 100 people? Not say that every life is like exactly equal, because I do think there are, people have a, there's a vague sense of, somebody being more worthwhile than others, in a, I guess, a practical or an economic sense, but in a, I'll say like a spiritual sense, a human soul is a human soul. Again, whatever your concept of soul or lack thereof is. So there's some equality, there's some vague equality between two human souls. And so to choose between an elderly grandmother and a son to live, again, the more noble death would be for the, the grandmother to sacrifice, or the lives. And again, you could bring in actuaries or, divorce attorneys or whoever who could mathematicize things and go, well, they have this many years of life left or something. But in general, there is still this equality between, like, fine, I don't care if grandma's dying in a year, they're still kind of vaguely equivocal to, 7-year-old child or something. Um, so I don't know. I just, people act like they never have a choice. You always have a choice. Like, you may not like the choice, but you always have it. It's like, even if I get robbed or I get stuck up and someone puts a gun to my head and says, I'm going to shoot you if you give you all your money. It's like, well, I didn't have a choice. I had to give him my money. It's like, okay, I understand what you mean by that, but you still had a choice, technically. The choice, you could have just said no and let him shoot you. Now, I'm not arguing that's the better choice to make, but like that you like don't have a choice is bullshit. So I hear this more with like people who they hate their job and they're like, oh, I want to kill myself. Well, this job's awful. So it's like, all right, well then just quit your job and just, and they're like, well, I can't. I don't have a choice. It's like, no, no, no. You have a choice. You could quit your job. It's just very impractical. It'd be annoying to get another one, or fine, maybe you don't think you can get another one, or maybe you need the money right now. It's like you could deal with all the consequences of quitting your job. You just don't want to. So it's not. Don't tell me you don't have a choice. You have a choice. You just don't like the choices that you have, which is fair. But don't frame it as like I had no option. You always have an option. You just may not like the options. Um, sometimes again, sure, it's like I'm not a risky person. It's like fine, but you still have a choice to do that, to leave your job. And it's like fine, you're either gonna die of starvation and not have any money, or you're gonna kill yourself because you hate your job. So it's like, all right, well, which death is more preferable to you? Like if you're inevitably going to die, with or without this job, which way would you rather die? And it's like, okay, fine. If you'd rather die by killing yourself after working a job that you hate than by starving to death, then fine, then you can keep the job. But don't like complain about it and tell me you have no choice when you very obviously have a choice. And I realize that's kind of like that's an unsympathetic argument to make. It's like, your choice is to starve or work. It's like, but I'm simply saying that there's still a choice there. I'm not saying it's good choices. You don't have good choices. You don't have good options, but you have options. Don't tell me you don't, because otherwise, I feel like you're being, dishonest. Anyway, um, let's see here. Yeah, I was thinking about myself in the past, and maybe it's just a way of the human way of internalizing. I guess the way your life has gone on. But it always seems that like if I think about myself, when I was 15 or when I was 12 or something, I can almost visualize myself as having a singular focus. When at the time was quite aware that I did not have a singular focus. Like I was doing many things at once. But at the time, it just felt like I only had one thing on my mind, like a specific life goal that I wanted to do. But that's like hardly the case. Um, so I don't know. It was interesting to think about like myself in the past, because it's like you never get a mental space that you're in for one moment comes and goes and passes, and it'll never be there again. But the decisions that you make ultimately do stick around. It's like decisions of like going to school or doing a sport of some kind. Like these decisions, surely like you don't have the mental space that you were in when you made those decisions to you know go to this school or do this sport or start dating this girl or boy or whatever. I don't care if you're gay. No one does. But then those decisions, obviously, like you made them, and those are concrete. Those kind of stick with you. But the headspace that you were in at that time doesn't. But looking back, you only ever see the decisions you make, and not necessarily the headspace. Which isn't to impart any advice on this. I don't know what to make of that as as a thought. But I just do think it is interesting that we can't, like, the headspace is gone, but the decisions stick with you. And so it's one thing to kind of ruminate on like, well, what the fuck was I thinking? Like, why was I thinking this? Why was I thinking this? Why was I thinking this? And then you go drive yourself into this frenzy about, why was I thinking this or that? Whereas I think the more rational and even and stoic way of looking at this is okay, okay, well, whatever headspace I was in, I'm going to trust myself, and I ended up with this decision, whether or not it was the right decision or a good one. I don't know. Um, but now that the decision was kind of made for me by my past self, now what do I do? So it's almost more of a proactive, like, well, uh, you know, approach to it, where you're not ruminating and ruining yourself for for decisions that you may have made in a different headspace, because you don't really know. Like, I did all kinds of dumbass stuff throughout my life, but if I'm gonna go back in time, I can't really reason with a previous version of myself, so I'm ultimately left with their decisions. And and again, even at this exact moment, I'm making decisions that maybe in 5 years, I'll be like, what the fuck was I doing? Why was I doing that? And I could either try to reason with a self that no longer exists, or I could live with, I could trust the current self, and let the future self kind of, deal with it, and live that way. I think it's pointless to live in a way where you're constantly like self-criticizing and trying to like rationalize or understand decisions that you made, a long time ago, because they're ultimately, they're past you. So it's just a long-winded way of saying like, uh, you know, because don't think too much about your past headspace and only really deal with like the decisions that your past self made. So the configuration that you're currently in is whatever you thought was best for you at that time. Now, whether or not that was right or not is fine, but they were only working with a limited set of information, and same as information you have now. Like, if let's say that World War III breaks out next year, if I knew that in advance, I could make preparations now, but I don't know that. So then it's like, okay, well, fine. Are you really going to fault me for not being proactive about World War III? It's like, well, all the warning signs were there. I should have known. It's like, well, fine, but I don't. And it's like, and if I start prepping now and it doesn't happen because I don't gamble, then I look like a fucking idiot who built a bunker with every last dime they had, and now I have to eat canned tuna or something for the next 20 years. I don't know. Either way, I don't know. It's because I think people in general have a tendency, and maybe it's just a specific type of person, to be, self-critical, or just not even self-critical, just over-analytical of their past selves, and be like, well, why was I doing this? Like, I'm such an idiot. But I think it's fine to be a little bit more sympathetic to yourself, knowing that they're only working with a certain amount of information. And sure, it's like maybe the information was right in front of them, and the telltale signs were there, but they have to assume that there's decent reasons for them to ignore certain things, or to follow, or to be, because there's times where like I really got into stuff, and I was into something, as a kid, I used to love like doing like these like little graffiti drawings, but I didn't do it with spray paint. I just did them with like pencil and paper. And now, like, in hindsight, like maybe I'd still do that now, because it was kind of cool, and I did like that. But getting into like why I was doing that, I was like, what even inspired me to, like, why was I doing that? I'd spend my afternoons, doing those. And sure, it's maybe like I could have been smoking cigarettes, so I'm glad I was, doing that instead, which is, one way to look at it. But at the same time, I'm not going to like over question why I was like infatuated with something at a certain time. And even maybe in 10 years, I'm looking back at all these old Minecraft videos, and I'm like, the fuck was I doing? I spent, thousands and thousands of hours probably playing Minecraft and editing videos for, nobody to watch, or I guess, my 500 subscribers or something. And what was I thinking? And I could either do that, or I could just, right now that's kind of what I want to be doing, and what I think is, good use of my time, and in an arguable sense. I'm sure it's not financially lucrative, but I think it's, good for me psychologically, and honing some tech skills, video editing and stuff like that, I think is fine. Although I don't edit these videos, but the other ones I do. I think some of that's good, but I don't know. I don't. I'm not going to question a lot of my decisions at the time, because I think that just leads to more, um, you know, I guess self hatred or something, or just self doubt in general. And I don't want to be someone who spends their whole life doubting themselves, only to realize that whenever when you're 60, they'll be, damn, why did I spend all that time thinking of, like, doubting myself, when I should have just fucking done something, and just kind of lived with it. So it's not to be too gung ho about living in general, but I think that people that are very risk averse and conservative with how they view making decisions with things. I think they tend to doubt themselves too much, and they don't kind of give themselves the benefit of the doubt, or just say that we're just going to ride with it, whatever. Like, it, odds are this decision probably won't be the last one I'll ever make. Is this really going to kill me? Then fine, I can kind of, if it's a life or death decision, like do I jump off this, bridge? Maybe that is a kind of more impactful thing, but you won't even have time to doubt that because you'll be dead. Otherwise, like if it doesn't kill you, um, you know, surely there are decisions that would almost kill you and you'd regret. Like if you jumped off and then broke every limb in your body, you'd probably spend a few months thinking about how dumb that decision was. But besides stuff like that that would like physically or psychologically harm you for long bouts of time, other stuff just like quitting a job or something, or breaking up with somebody you don't like, or whatever it is that is causing you so much stress and anxiety, or just even just like something like getting rid of your phone or just deleting TikTok. It's like, well, I love TikTok. It's like just delete it, and like maybe you'll just find yourself thanking yourself later. Sir, I'll thank you. I will thank you personally if you comment on this video. Say I deleted Instagram Reels or the Pornhub app off my phone because of this video. I will comment back and I will thank you myself because it means something to me, even if it doesn't for you. So anyway, that's how I'll end it this time. But thanks for watching. Peace out.